Well, good morning, everyone from Vancouver, and thank you for joining us today here at Minefield Group for part 2 of Bulletproofing Your Recruitment Strategy for Growth. I'm Jerry Grattan. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Minefield Group, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Alongside me today are Andy Jones, our Business Development Director, and Cameron Laker, the keynote today, our Founder and CEO. Before we get started, let me just give you like a 10-second tutorial on GoToWebinar in case this is your first time on the platform. You'll notice up in the top right-hand corner a console that you can use to expand the chat feature and send us your questions throughout the presentation, and we're going to have a period of time at the end to get to those. We're looking forward to your questions, so please, as they come up, type them in and we'll get to them. If you missed part 1 of this, you'll notice it's part 2. Don't worry, on our minefieldgroup.com website, the webinar for part 1 will be posted in the next day or so. And as a matter of fact, you can go there and look at all the webinars that we've done in the past. Let's take a look at the agenda today. Here's how it looks. I'm going to kick it off with a quick intro to Minefield Group. Then I'm going to turn it over to Cameron, and he'll share his thoughts around bulletproofing your recruitment strategy for growth. We'll then open up the chat feature for Q&A. And finally, at the end, for those of you that just can't get enough, Andy's going to share his thoughts on why companies are choosing RPO, and he's going to provide a quick look at our services and recruitment process. So let's get started. Who we are here at Minefield Group. Well, Minefield Group is a recruitment process outsourcing, or RPO, provider for the retail industry, specializing in frontline staffing. We were founded in 2005, and we're number 8 on Profit Magazine's hot list in 2009. But, you know, that doesn't really sound like who we really are. Here's who we are. We're sourcing fanatics. We are social media gurus and technology geeks, and we're proud of it. We're talent sleuths and best practice junkies, and we love what we do. And here's what we do. We help our customers make great hires quickly. These promises: frontline staff, 2 in 72, management staff, 3 qualified candidates in 30 days. Here's another way of looking at it. Last year we helped make over 10,000 hires. This year we'll help with over 15,000 hires for our customers. And here's just a few of those customers that we work with. But that's enough about me and Minefield. I'd like to turn it over now for the keynote part of our presentation. I'm very pleased to introduce the keynote speaker for today's webinar. He's the founder and CEO of Minefield Group, and he's a thought leader in the area of talent acquisition, particularly in understanding how to leverage technology, process, and Web 2.0 to recruit great talent. Today, in part 2, he's going to share his thoughts around screening and selection, your brand, your employment brand, and the candidate experience. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Cameron Laker. Cameron?
Thanks very much, Jerry. Thanks, everyone. I hope this is you can see my professional glamour shot is here on the screen here. So we did a photo shoot with the staff a couple of years back, and anyways, I'll leave it at that. So as I hop into this, there's a couple areas I want to touch on. From the last session that we did last week, there's a couple key areas I talked about around strategic objectives. Number 1 was, when building a recruitment strategy, it's very critical to align your recruitment plan with your corporate strategy. And we talked a little about that last session, but essentially making sure that you've got clarity on where the organization is going and how recruitment can play a part in supporting that overall corporate strategy. The next key objective when building a strategy is to improve the effectiveness and the ROI on all your recruitment spend. So whether that's advertising or assessment tools or technologies, making sure that you're leveraging those dollars in the best fashion possible. And then finally, one of the key objectives when putting together a recruitment strategy is ultimately to build a competitive advantage. Today's session will really talk a lot about, we're talking about screening and selection and employment branding, but the employment branding and candidate experience piece is really where I believe organizations can build some of the most substantial competitive advantage over their competitors. So areas to cover. We previously covered candidate sourcing and recruitment technology, and as Jerry mentioned, we will have last week's webinar up online, so you can view it just online there on our website. And today, really focused on two key areas: screening and selection, and then employment branding. So a couple of conclusions that we made and key steps coming out of the last session, which I felt was important to recognize here, was number one is being really clear on identifying what your key objectives and goals are when you develop your recruitment strategy. Determine who your target profile is, including the key competencies needed. So we talked at length last session about what is it that you're really looking for, and similar to a marketing and sales strategy, you wouldn't go to market and not know who your dedicated, who your target market was. So very important to have a very, very clear understanding of who it is you're trying to attract to your organization. The next piece is develop a very broad sourcing and advertising program to attract high volume of applicants. And a lot of people on the call are thinking high volumes, yeah, that's one thing, but we want quality. Well, what we've seen time and time again as best practices from a retail sourcing perspective is if you can drive in a very high volume worth of applicants through smart advertising and sourcing, and then have the right technology in place to filter through those applicants, it can provide you with a substantial competitive advantage, and ultimately help speed up time to hire and provide your managers with options on who they hire. The next piece was to implement recruitment technology that allows you to quickly screen through candidates to identify the best fit based on those initial profiling exercises, and I'm going to speak to a little bit about that today. Number 5 being leverage search engines, blogs, and social networks to distribute your job content. In the world of, in the year 2010, static content doesn't fly anymore, so it's very important that your job content is it's easily portable, and search engines are recognizing it via meta tags and keywords, which is what we talked about in the last session. And then finally, building a career-focused employment brand and website with corresponding Facebook and Twitter pages, so everything all works together. And I always see your Facebook fan page and your Twitter pages and so forth as kind of mini career websites that are all little windows into your organization. So they should be ultimately extensions of your careers website, not siloed as a different tool. And then finally, to measure. So we talked about some of the reporting tools and things that you can analyze against some of these strategies. So getting into today, so screening and selection, to start off with the definition, is the process of collecting and evaluating information about an individual in order to extend an offer of employment. So as I jump into this here, there's some key steps in developing an effective screening and selection process. Now, this slide and a couple of slides coming up here, we could literally we could create entire webinars off of each one of these slides and spend hours talking about it. So I'm going to be going through some fairly academic type language here, but I think it's important, and we'll be going through it fairly quickly because they're all very deep topics. So I apologize for not getting in the level of depth on some of these areas that I would have liked to. Number 1 is a job analysis, and I'm going to speak to each one of these sections in detail. 2 being the identification of what the job requirements are. 3, the identification of the selection methods that you're going to use to assess these job requirements. The assessment of the reliability and the validity of the selection methods that you're putting in place. The use of selection methods to process these applicants. So as I hop in here into the job analysis, I'm actually just going to run our first poll, and the poll is, and it's going to launch here in a second. Have you done a formal job analysis for the front line? It says for all your jobs in the organization, but we're really speaking to the retail level, so those core retail levels. And I'm going to run the poll here now, and it's going to give everyone a couple minutes to answer that question, and then we'll report back on the answers. Give it another 10 seconds here. Okay, just a couple more people. All right, so it looks like the responses here, and I'm going to close the poll down. It was almost a 50-50 split. It was actually 52% yes, they've done a formal job analysis, and 48% of you no. So that gets me excited, because then that means that the ones who said no, they're going to get some value out of today, and for those who said yes, maybe there's some pieces out of this that may be worthwhile to revisit. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is a job analysis? It's a systematic study of job content in order to determine the major duties and responsibilities of the job. Blah, blah, blah. Basically, I know it's very academic, but it's probably the best way to define it. So I want to talk to how to go conduct this job analysis, and this will be very familiar for some of you on the call, and some of you this may be something that you may want to look at. So number one is reviewing the company's documents. The first step is what's in place, and you may be new to HR to your organization, or you may be someone there for a while, and you've grown by 50 locations in the last 12 months, and there's a real need to look at this stuff. So there's typically a lot of documents around past competencies, focus groups, and things that have happened in the past. So we always recommend whenever we go look at running through this program is what's currently in place. There's typically documents within your organization that will help you get started quickly. The next piece is research other job description resources. So there's some great things around skills and knowledge and capabilities on HRDC's site. There's also a site in the States called ONET, which has got some great resources as well, which I highly recommend that you have a look at. And ultimately, good old Google also helps as well. So looking at what some of these job descriptions may look like in other organizations. Interview the staff that are currently involved in the position, and out of all the steps here that I'm going to speak to, this is probably the most important, is try to understand just what is it that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Have these employees then that you're speaking with actually write out their job duties. What are they essentially doing every single day? What that allows you to do then is to boil this down to reduce it to what are the basic minimum requirements, but the most important requirements for someone to succeed in this job. And again, what we're doing is we're not defining the ideal candidate here. We're defining what is truly this job. And then finally, have the employees evaluate the list. Send that, once you get the feedback and document it, have them go provide you feedback on is this accurate to what their feedback was, and in fact what they actually do. And then finally, revise it and submit it. And there's likely someone in your organization who will want to look at this to get clarity and definition on what is that job analysis look like. So. Again, we could spend an entire webinar on that section, and I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective. But if you looked at it and said, if I started interviewing key staff in key areas, whether this is online or by surveys, and have them actually write their own job descriptions, there may be some huge eye openers there, which may impact what we talked about last session, your sourcing strategy, or what we're talking about today, how you're positioning the employment brand offering to the overall market. The next step is identifying job requirements. So once you've got a handle from the job analysis and really understanding the job, this is where you go to identify the knowledge and the skills and the abilities needed. So what's the training needed for someone? What are the components of the job that you really need to train someone on? What's the knowledge needed either prior to or post becoming a produce clerk, for example, or an oil technician? What are the skills needed for someone? And then finally, what are the personality traits that you're looking for in these people? And what you start to do here, once you get the job analysis really tight, these job requirements start to really help you clarify on what it is that you're looking for. So now I want to talk a little bit about the selection methods. So once you know the requirements, you've got to figure out a way, how do you assess the job applicants that are applying against what essentially these requirements are and what the job analysis looks like. Some of the ways, and this is going to be old news for a lot of you on the call, but for clarity reasons, some of the selection methods you can put in place: competency-based phone screen guides, reference